What's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Hope you all have had a great weekend so far. In this video, we're really going to start to take a look at August. We're in the last day of the month of July, and August is obviously when you start to get a big time uptick in hurricane or just tropical activity in the Atlantic, basically anywhere. Right now, there's not anything really going on. I can tell you in the Eastern Pacific, it is really popping off. You got multiple areas that we can really talk about here, but we'll really talk about the Atlantic, and we're trying to figure out when is it going to start to get active again. And I really think as we get a little bit deeper into August, probably around the second week, maybe by this time next weekend, we're really going to begin to have something to talk about. Not a threat, but something to talk about. So we're really going to break down this video, basically the limiting factors for tropical development, the more promoting factors of tropical development, and what we need in place for tropical activity to start to get kicked up. We got something called MJO phases, and one promotes sinking air and one promotes rising air. And rising air is what you need for tropical development. Sinking air, which has kind of been in place for the majority of July besides the beginning of the month, has really been in place. You have the Saharan dust that has been a big time limiting factor for tropical development. So we're going to break down where we're heading for August. Is there any threats down the road? Can it get threatening down the road? And is there anything showing up in the models right now? So stay tuned. We're going to cover all this, and definitely thank y'all for tuning in. So if you guys have not subscribed to my channel, definitely hit that subscribe button. I make videos every single day. It's going to get active again, guys. It's been slow for about 3.5 weeks since Elsa. But it's going to get active again, so definitely hit the subscribe button, like the video if you like it. It helps to get the video out there in the algorithm. If you got anything I can pray about, put it in the comments. It gives me an opportunity to pray for you guys, and it gives other people an opportunity to do it too. If it's unspoken, just put that, and we got your back here. So thank y'all for tuning in, and let's get going. So obviously there's nothing going on right now. Y'all saw this at the beginning. You take a peek here on the left side of the video. Well, it might be the right side depending on what you're looking at, but on this side of the video, basically off the coast of Mexico in the Eastern Pacific, it is popping off right now. In fact, this is the National Hurricane Center for the Eastern Pacific, and 3 areas. One is Hilda, one is basically Tropical Depression 9, and you have an area that has a 70% chance to develop in the next 5 days. That is because they're in a favorable MJO phase right now that basically promotes tropical activity, and they have been in the last couple weeks in a big time favorable area, basically that promotes tropical activity, like I just said. But as you're looking here, let's look at this right here. So today, this is the phase we have in place. You look right, I know this is kind of hard to see, but you look right in here. This basically, the blues and the purples and the pinks that you see, that symbolizes rising air. The more yellows and things like that, that symbolizes sinking air. So we need this phase to kind of move into this area, into basically in the tropical Atlantic, for it to become a favorable setup for tropical development. Right here is this is what you call basically a Kelvin wave. So this is right at basically the leading edge of, I guess you can call a pattern shift. And this is moving from this way to this way. So it's moving, depending on what part of the world you're in, this is moving from west to east. So it's moving this way. So this is eventually going to move into this area, which is the tropical Atlantic, from the Eastern Pacific to the tropical Atlantic. Week 1, so this is the week 1 forecast. Notice you start to get rid of that sinking air, of that unfavorable phase for tropical development, and you start to get a better phase. And this begins to shift a little bit more east, and but still, it's much more favorable in the Eastern Pacific than it is the Atlantic. You begin to get into week 2, we're starting to get into basically the second week of August, and it starts to shift even more into the Atlantic. And this is when we need to watch out for tropical development. Week 3, this will become even more into the tropical Atlantic. And that's when I think some things are going to start to really pop up here. I meant to have something else pulled up here, but basically, this is right now. And this is going to be very small to see on your screen, but if you check this out right here, this is a bunch of red, basically off the western coast of North America. and the Eastern Pacific, and that is where, in fact, you look at these negatives right here, these dark purples, that is rising air, more favorable conditions for tropical development. Well, believe it or not, right where this is right where you have your all those areas right here that are popping off in the Eastern Pacific, these tropical disturbances. So it lines up well. This guy has a great, let's see, it's a Michael Ventris, great site. This is hard to understand. I've learned about it over the last half year, and what these means, but it lines up very well to when you get into a favorable phase for tropical development. So I know this is a lot, but in a nutshell, we're about to move into a favorable time frame, a favorable MJO phase for tropical development. Now, let's look at some factors that could basically limit and almost put a cap on any kind of tropical development. One thing is shear, and I can tell you it looks like in the kind of the Eastern Caribbean, it looks like, or in the Western Atlantic, in this area, you got something called a TUT, especially basically like an upper level low that kind of throws some shear into this area. Now, this is the GEFS. We're going through in time. If you want to know where we are, this is today, July 31st, 18Z Saturday. So might be kind of small to see on your video, but that's where if you want to follow along as far as date-wise. Now check it out. That is a classic TUT look right here. But look at all this. The reds and things that you see, that is strong shear. You got shear down here too. Now, this is a big-time factor when you have tropical systems that want to ride really low, really south, and affect the Lesser Antilles and get into this area. Sometimes they call this the Caribbean graveyard, especially early on in the tropics and in the hurricane season, because you often have a lot of shear in this area. Elsa survived this area because it just happened to move through in a period where there wasn't as strong a shear, which was pretty rare for that time of year. But I want to mention, as you get deeper into hurricane season, August, September especially, you start to lose the shear down here. Just naturally happens. It's climate. Climatology says that over time, shear begins to weaken in this area. Now, I want to go through, notice, August 4th, August 5th, shear at some point kind of relaxes in this area. But how long? So we watch this time frame late next week. That actually might be a favorable time frame for maybe something to get going right in here. But will the shear return? And it looks like it kind of does down here. But it's not super strong. But there is a little bit of shear down there right here, just south of Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Jamaica. But there's not really any shear right in this area as you start to get into a more favorable phase for tropical development. Another thing you want to look at is dry air. Check out all this. Where you see the browns, that's dry air. Where you see the greens and blues, that's more moist air. This site, Tropical Tidbits, which I mentioned, is a phenomenal free site that Levi has made here. He's the creator of this, and it's phenomenal. I've been using it for years, and it's just a great site. But you notice all the browns right here, so we're moving through in time, and I'm in the negatives right now. Okay, here we go. So you notice a ton of basically dry air. This is basically probably Saharan dust. It is. You have a big area of Saharan dust still draping over the North Atlantic and the tropical Atlantic, and that's probably going to be a limiting factor for tropical development also. But you notice down here it's starting to get more and more moist. That is because these tropical waves are beginning to kind of moisten up this area down here. They're not really developing. If they do, they don't have any kind of a long-term future to them. But they are helping to moisten this area up. I really do. And it actually shows here too. Moistens the area up. You see a little low pressure pops up right there for around this time next week. So, it's interesting to see how much the dry air. But either way, I think we gradually over time begin to lose basically the limiting factors for tropical development one by one, I think, in the coming days and weeks. Next thing we're going to look at is sea surface temperatures. I want to mention, if anything gets in the Gulf of Mexico, I think that even with some moderate shear, I really think that it's going to explode. If it makes it, or if you get something where you get some kind of development, any kind of development that just kind of forms in the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to take everything in the world to not let this thing explode, just due to these sea surface temperatures. You got sea surface temperatures in the mid to upper 80s in the Gulf of Mexico. It's like a bathtub right now, especially near the Keys, the Florida Keys. It's very warm right now, and it's very warm everywhere else too, in the low to mid 80s down here. You look at the tropical Atlantic, it's a little cool up here, but it's not really anything that's below average or anything. But down here, way low in the tropical Atlantic, down this area where these waves like to form, where you have to really watch, it's plenty warm enough for tropical development. Now you look at this area compared to average, there is a little bit of below average temperatures right here, but below average by just this much isn't doing anything. It's not. It's still warm enough for tropical development for sure. One big thing I want to watch, and this is going to impact your steering currents, and I've talked about this a lot, and this is kind of one of the more scarier things, that and sea surface temperatures that promote more threatening scenarios for tropical activity. Look at the high pressure in the North Atlantic. One thing I will note, if you're not familiar, is tropical systems do not go into high pressures. If they're really strong, they can steer around the base of them pretty tight, but they're not going to plow into them. They're just not, unless it's just stuck and it has no steering currents. Kind of like Florence. Florence had no steering current, so it was just kind of meandering and getting kind of persuaded by high pressure. You could look through in time here, and we're looking at the GEFS. We're getting into August 3rd, 4th. Notice the H just stays over the North Atlantic. That is high pressure, so anything that forms down here can't really curve out this way. And that is some pretty strong ridging that's not going to allow anything to move north. So what that means is anything that develops down here is going to keep that basically that east to west track and stay south and get closer to the Caribbean islands and potentially the U.S. mainland down the road. You look here, the H just sits here. We're getting into this time next week. We're starting to get into basically the midway point of the month, and there might be a little bit of weakening in the ridges that might allow anything to curve a little bit. But either way, ridge of high pressure remains throughout the entire run, and the GEFS goes out to a 384 hours out, which is not a reliable time frame whatsoever. But I think it is for this. There's been the Atlantic Ridge has been out there all year so far, not all year, but for a while now. And I think it's going to remain out there. And I think that's why people are so worried about this being a threatening as in tropical systems impacting the mainland year for hurricane activity. Now, I do want to mention, one thing I do want to mention, I back it up here, is the amount of troughs and upper level lows, troughs I would say, cold fronts, that might be the saving grace for some people sometimes. What that would mean for the U.S. is frequent cold fronts, like frequent as we get into maybe the late month of August, September. That would mean some nice crisp fall air. Normally when you have cold fronts and fall air in place, you're probably not going to be hearing about any kind of tropical activity impacting the area. One big example I want to mention is Hurricane Michael. When it hit the Florida Panhandle, it had been an extremely warm fall for the southeast. I don't think it even got below 60 degrees for here in Columbia, South Carolina, until August 12th that year of 2018. But what happened is Hurricane Michael came through, hit the Florida Panhandle, and it was driven by a cold front, a strong cold front, and it steered it all out, and it was a big-time pattern change, and you didn't hear about the tropics anymore after that. So that's a pretty good example for troughs steering tropical systems. It really is. So we have to watch out for any kind of troughs. Those are big-time steering factors. So the next thing we're really going to look at here, we're going to look at the European model. We're going to look at the GFS, the latest operational runs. We're going to get through here, And check it out here. As we're moving through here in time, we're getting into midway this week. We're getting into late this week. Check it out here. You see the darker greens down here? That is little tropical disturbances. Now, that's not full-blown tropical storms or hurricanes, no. But as you get deeper into the run, entered around this time next week, so next Saturday. But these are areas we need to watch. This is 174 hours out, so, it's not a super long range. It's about 7 days out. It's inside 10 days, and this is kind of the time frame that we've been really seeing about the first week into the second week of August, that really we're going to start to begin to talk about the tropics again. And this little system right here, you got to watch it. This is a favorable area. The phasing as far as the MJO begins to move into the area. It isn't fully into the area, but there's probably some shear right here that's probably going to prevent this from really going. But there is something forming. And then here comes another wave off North Africa at day 10. So there is some activity out there. So I wouldn't be surprised as maybe in the next several days until as we get into next week that we start to see areas that have the potential for developing, like a 10 to 20% chance of developing. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So it's something we need to watch now. The latest GFS has been showing this one area, this tropical wave coming off North Africa early to midway next week. And then it kind of just sitting here. It's been showing this weird kind of setup for the last several days. And they really get to about the midway point of the tropical Atlantic. And they look like they're just kind of falling apart. They're kind of downgrading themselves into tropical waves. So there's definitely something right in here that's not really favorable for continued development and continued progression of tropical development here is what I'm seeing here. But there's still some tropical moisture that's really flying into the Caribbean that we need to watch here, especially if we can get into the Gulf of Mexico in time. The last thing I want to show y'all guys is the good old SpaghettiOs. I like looking at these. And basically these are areas of predicted low pressures that the ensembles, the EPS ensembles are trying to pick up. And as we're getting going here in time, we're getting into next weekend, we're getting into the second week of August. And look at these little areas. They're going to be hard to see on your screen, but you're about to see something now. And check it out. As we get into about the August 10th to 12th range, it's starting to pick up on something. Those are, it's trying to show little individual hurricanes. I'm not saying there's 3 hurricanes in one area. It's basically an ensemble run. Ensemble runs are several ones put together to create an ensemble. So that's something we need to watch. It's trying to. This would match up well with what the high pressure was showing at the same kind of time frame on the GEFS. It looks like it's a little bit further out east, which may allow for these things to kind of recurve, which you need to watch out for the southeast. So, like I said, that second week of August, need to watch out, guys. Might be something bigger to talk about, but that's all I got, guys. I hope that helped you out. Buckle up if you're around the southeast coast. Heck, even the northeast, you got to watch out. And then obviously the Gulf Coast. I know y'all already know from last year, but that's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in, and y'all have a great rest of your weekend.